Welcome to the Beacon Way podcast, hosted by award-winning executive team of Beacon Media and Marketing. With over 3 decades of experience, Adrienne, Jennifer, and Ken give you an insider's view of what's working, what's not, and what's on the horizon for digital marketing. Grow your business today with the Beacon Way podcast.
Well, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Beacon Way podcast. I'm your host, Adrienne Wilkerson today, and I'm very excited to be joined by Dustin Serviss. Did I say that right? Did I get that? Oh,
you
wonderful.
did, yeah, you nailed
Wonderful.
it.
So Dustin joins us. He is a business owner like most of our guests are, and he started Serviss Wealth back in 2005, I believe, if I remember that right. And his goal starting that was really to help business owners and successful families navigate the complexities of wealth and insurance. I think that's something that always is sitting at least in the back of our minds as entrepreneurs that we need to pay attention to, if not in the front of our minds. So we're really excited to get to talk to you today, Dustin, and kind of share some of your journey and what got you started into this industry and kind of how you're helping other business owners and entrepreneurs walk that journey. So welcome.
Thanks a lot for having me on the show, and to hear that introduction, that definitely is it's a traditional tagline for the financial planning world, which I'm sure you could pull that from many financial planners, and I'm excited to talk about today where that's evolved to in mindset with business owners and wealth. You know, when we started 20 years ago, the landscape was different, which is totally fine, and my views of the industry and what wealth is were different too. Yeah,
I'm excited to dig into that with you today. So to start us off, tell us a little bit about what prompted you to start your own business. What was the impetus? There's usually some story, something that sparked you into it. What was kind of your defining moment, or what launched you into this business?
Sure. So I took engineering in school, civil engineering, and I was working for a surveying company, and we were drafting, survey plans in the oil patch in Alberta, and I could figure out if I worked a certain amount of hours, what the maximum. If I worked 24 hours in a day, I could see what the maximum would be that I would make. So the impetus really came up of I was kind of curious about stocks, always curious about money, and so drive a Ferrari and trade stocks was sort of the goal. And so I literally at 23 left my near 6-figure job and moved back to the Okanagan in British Columbia, and fast realized in my first year of business, making $15,000, that no Ferrari and just buying mutual funds for clients, I was far off my goal, but stuck with it, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, very cool. So very interesting. Oftentimes, I think when we start our journey, we think it's going to be one way, and then kind of the rubber hits the road and reality sinks in for sure. But it's amazing to me when the consistency comes into play, like how much that does kind of end up paying off. But oftentimes we see the big stories of the guys that hit it big and, sell for millions and millions of dollars. And I don't think that's the reality of what most of us deal with as business owners. It's more the consistency of sticking with it.
Yeah, I'm reading an interesting book right now. I got a piece of paper over I think it's Kenneth Stanley is the co-author, but it's the title of the book is Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned.
Ooh, very cool.
And it's written in 2018, but it was at the cusp of sort of like some good AI. And he's talking about, what you just brought up, and what made me think it was like why, great people create these amazing things. And, the truly great things are usually from experimenting and literally a guy trying the light bulb or, tinkering around with a computer, not really, reading all the business books, studying all the podcasts every time they step in their vehicle, not doing all this very regimented thing to achieve an objective. So I don't want to ruin the book, but at the same time, to get the point, it's like we set out, so just even my stupid example about like drive a Ferrari, trade stocks. It's like somewhere I picked that up as a 20-year-old
Right.
that was this life I perceived that I wanted. And so it was like, I'm going to do everything in my power. And so it's like, guys read business books, guys do this. Well, it's like now maybe I'm seeing it different at, mid 40s that, there's some excitement in being curious and discovering things. And in the world today of business and, you listen to podcasts, you hear a guy or they've written a course. And so you're going to do a course and you're like, yes, I'm going to do exactly what that guy did. And then I'm going to be loaded and have this great life. I see that not being as much the case. And, a lot of what I talk about in my books, podcast is not selling yourself short on life in quest of that.
Yeah. I think that's really valuable. I don't think I've had a single podcast with a business owner where work-life harmony is what I call it instead of balance, doesn't come up, of that, how many of us end up 20 years into the business or whatnot and look back and go, man, I wish I'd spent more time in the business. Very rarely. I don't know of anybody that comes up. It's the same thing on your deathbed. Who said, oh, I wish I spent more time with my business? And that's really never the case. It's more, I wish I had spent more time with my family or my friends or gone and traveled when I was young enough and healthy enough to do that, kind of a thing. So I appreciate that message of, there's in some ways, like we were talking about right before the podcast, more to life than, wealth doesn't necessarily mean stocks in a Ferrari, although it can. Hence the very cool story in your book about discovering what wealth actually is and means. And, sometimes that means taking some risks to embrace that.
Yeah, well, I often say that you're never going to get an email that comes in saying you're approved to take Fridays off. It's going to start with you and being uncomfortable. And, also a key takeaway in the book, one of the points was looking at things like an experiment.
Yeah.
And, and more so like the business owners that we work with are I'm not trying to execute all the changes right at once. Yeah. Usually it's one little message of like, hey, just this morning, I bike rode with a guy. We got met at 7:45. He's always been in his office at 7:45, and so he's in the agriculture business. And if he's listening, Matt, thanks for the ride this morning. But so just that act of like, we haven't even talked about it, but the act of like, hey, let's go for a ride. It'd be good for our health, and you're going to get to the office at 9 instead of 7:45. Right. We'll just do it for a week. We'll see what happens. See if everything goes for shit.
Wow.
So, yeah. And it doesn't. And so then it's kind of like, let's see next week. And you can fill in the blank of what example you want to experiment with. But for some business owners, that just tweaks the imagination enough to kind of open up the thought to an idea.
Well, and you were sharing a little bit of a story that kind of aligns with that at Strategic Coach in our last session about riding your motorcycle to work or to meet clients. How's that experiment worked out?
Yeah, I think it's great. So the essence of the story was what's a win for the week. And, a huge thing in my business, traditional financial planning, suit and tie. I never really was a tie guy, but definitely jacket, pants, look presentable. And, you have this thing and maybe it's younger. You're trying, we deal with high net worth people and have from the start. So it was kind of like perceiving this sense of trust is important. So someone could probably bash me down and say, well, yeah, at the start, you got to do it. But it still was a fear I had. Now, 20 years in the business, and I'm thinking, oh, man. So, yeah, I did. I took my Harley and, had a series of meetings. And I've done it a number of times in this last spring. But one particular day in Kelowna, I rode there and had about 5 meetings that I rode to each meeting, took my helmet to the meeting, left my jacket in the bike. But, at the end of the day, the people want answers. The people have a question, and it's like, hey, I'm going to give you that answer by the end of the day. So, you're delivering, you're still delivering great service. It just looks different. So maybe you might say, oh, people don't like an image, but at the same time, it was an experiment that seems to be and the longer it goes on, and the more that like you start to meet clients that love Harleys, then you're like actually getting clients from, that sort of that feeling that you're not suit and tie, door-to-door salesman. So
it's becoming something we're seeing become way more important in the marketing world, even. And it's personal branding is not new, really. It's tagged as that now, but it's not technically a new concept. It's how does a CEO's personal brand align with their company's brand? But it's becoming a bigger and bigger deal, especially as AI takes over a lot more of the marketing messaging out there for companies. And so people were finding more and more they want to connect with a human being. The saying is very frequently, people don't like to be sold, but they love to buy from somebody they know, like, and trust, right? And so how do you build connection? And especially how do you build connection as AI takes over and automates so much more of our marketing and our communication? And some would argue it starts sounding a lot more alike because, AI bots are essentially copying each other. And so personal branding is become, we're like, so first they learned from us. Now they're generating so much of the content online that they're basically learning from themselves. Now it's kind of a funny cycle. That's a whole nother discussion. But this personal branding idea of that there is a real human being behind that company brand. And how do we find ways to connect with our consumers as CEOs, as business owners? And so in many ways, what you are doing is a very physical manifestation of that personal branding. And that, like you're saying, that starts to connect with people and even opens up probably questions like, oh, what bike did you ride in on? I would ask that. I love motorcycles. In college, I didn't have one, but I had a helmet because I would bum rides off of everybody. Nice. And in Alaska, it was, passenger had to wear a helmet. Driver didn't, but, passenger did. And so I quite literally would have my school backpack and my helmet and be like, yeah, I'll pay your gas money if I can get to ride with you on your Harley or your crotch rocket or whatever it was. But that's when I first fell in love with Triumphs, was back then. So yeah, Triumphs were one of my favorite brands. But anyway, that personal brand that creates a connection, right, with somebody, even if they don't have a Harley, there's a certain brand that comes with that. And maybe that is part of their financial plan, is to want to be able to get to the point of doing that or whatnot. So I think in many ways you're doing that very much in the physical world by facing that fear, if you will, and choosing to kind of go out that way, which is really cool. Really cool. Well, to jump back to something that you said in the introduction, you're saying you've seen a lot of evolution and change in the financial world. So what are you talking to business owners about right now? What kind of questions are you dealing with? Where are you kind of helping people navigate through right now?
I think it's meeting them sooner in the arc of retirement. And maybe retirement is not a word we traditionally use, but flexibility or, a different role in the business. So, right now we deal with a lot of, high net worth or growing, like maybe it's a double dentist family. Maybe it's, no kids. Maybe it's, young family, 42-year-old home builder, doing well. And they're kind of feeling, or maybe there's a catalyst, a relationship is being pressed a bit. One spouse is maybe saying, hey, why are you working so hard? Be nice to have you at a Saturday soccer game. That would be cool. And it's like, well, no, I'm blue collar. And again, one thing I would say is we do probably 65% of our business is blue collar, ingrained mindset that, it's kind of an example of well, if I'm not in first and in last, then how are the boys going to respect me? And if I'm not in on Fridays, then, no one's going to work that hard. Right. And so there's this shift of well, yeah, but they haven't taken the risk. There's just a whole bunch of other things. So getting to unpack that and, that so backing up 20 years ago, it was like, here's a mutual fund, or, and that was basically all we did. In Canada, it's pretty like, here's a mutual fund. It's, it paid high fees up front. And so like, I remember being in my first, was the second firm I worked at. I was like, I wouldn't sell it to myself. So how am I going to sell that to, this was the old deferred sales charge,
Sure.
DSC mutual funds that existed. And so they paid big commission up front, but then the clients were locked in. And so it was like, well, I wouldn't sell it to myself.
Yeah.
So, that led to us working more high net worth right out of the gate, and, being fee based and sort of like, that's a whole different tangent, but that was more, like there was less kind of noise, or less access to noise. And so I think people have now, it's harder to cut through the messiness of like what's being sold to you in the financial space. And so finding key people, like the bulk of the financial planners are older and retiring. And so you have this, like, people are kind of flooding to the bank because that's like default, kind of like, oh, the bank must be trustworthy. It must have good financial planners. But then your banker is changing every few years. And so it's like, where do these people end? And unless you have, 10, 15 million, you're kind of stuck in a bit of a, if you got 25 grand, you could maybe do it yourself. But if you've got 4 million or 4.1, likely you've kind of fallen into the bank, and you get bank product, and you get sort of an investment. But what we find the most exciting part is actually helping people design lifestyle, opposed to, retirement plans. We use AI and software models that, like, it can do all that, but getting that human element of someone to uncover, so we help them uncover it, but they uncover it themselves, that, it sure would be nice if we bought a wreck property. And I'll tell you a story. One couple came into our office, this is a couple years ago, and they said one of their parents had passed away, and they had a bit of money, and not millions, but a fair bit. And so they said, we were at our cocktail party at our neighborhood wine and cheese or whatever, and we need to do stocks. We were talking to somebody, and we need to do investing. Like, we haven't done any investing. We need to do investing. And so that's how we opened the meeting. So I'm sitting there with them, and we're visiting, and it turns out that, a passion of the I'll say one spouse, not to get away, is gold panning. And the other person is grew up very outdoorsy, and always, rolled old quads and rode, like, didn't, grew up around that stuff, but not nice stuff. And so that then led to us ending the meeting where we were on the, in the States, you'd say Zillow, or like in Canada, we got realtor.ca, where you're looking at listings.
Right.
And when we got to the thing is, one of the people really wasn't that keen on stocks, thought they should do it. The other one was more bullish on it, but they both found peace in real estate. And they both, like, that was a goal, that they were going to invest in stocks, make some profit for 5 years, wait, because it's like, satisfaction should be delayed. And so wait until the investments have grown, and then get this wreck property. And so we finished that meeting basically finding 3 listings, and it was like, hey, why don't you go buy this right now, enjoy life, and start building up your savings. You're only in your young 40s, so it's like, you're not retiring tomorrow,
right?
And start enjoying something that you both are anchored to,
interesting,
and excited about. And so that's what they ended up doing. About 4 hours from Kelowna, they bought a place. So yeah,
that's really cool. I see this and hear this in a lot of different industries as AI continues to develop and be able to take over more and more of the, like, tactical, if you will, the actual implementation, the doing, where more and more people are bringing in their expertise to be able to ask the clients the right questions. Like you said, help kind of leading them through the process of what's actually important to you right now. And yes, you could go do this because that's what everybody does. But like you said, like, using AI, you can duplicate a lot of that, the actual tactical stuff, but it's the expertise of knowing where to invest that money, whether it is the stock market or a property now, and almost giving people permission, like you did with this couple, of like, you actually have enough runway that you don't have to do this right now. But a lot of times I think there's so much pressure around doing what everybody else is doing or just what the norm is. And so being able to bring that strategic expertise to the situation and know what questions to ask to help them make that journey is where so many of us business owners, I think, are finding our way through this AI world, is realizing that's very much the direction we need to go. And it sounds like you've been headed that direction for quite a while. I think a lot of business owners are sort of in the moment now trying to figure out, how do I make that pivot from just doing the thing to really advising and consulting, if you will.
Yeah, not comparing. You kind of brought that up. I do have one story where I have two clients that are friends, and neither of them know each other's financial situation, even though they know each other reasonably well. And so when you have comparison there and people are comparing to, and you could just never mind the clients, but it's like you compare to your friends, but you don't know the full picture.
Right.
And you don't know that someone else is significantly wealthier, or someone else has significant inheritance en route, or that someone else is just a riskier person.
Yeah. More comfortable
And
with
so,
it. Yeah.
you know, if you kind of like, you know, it is a personal journey. And having that, you know, we've both been taught who, not how in Strategic Coach. And having that ability to say, okay, I need to engage somebody. So a who of like, hey, instead of you having to try and figure it out by comparing, you would have somebody qualified in engage you to, in this instance, like figure out what's really important to you. And from seeing 20 years of so many different family financial situations, I see people that make 150 grand a year and they spend 40.
Yeah.
I see people that make 500 a year and they spend 600.
So, you just never know.
You know, it's a personal journey. And then you add a spouse in there and kids and old baggage.
Oh boy.
And it's a long journey of the plan is never done, is what we say to people. You know, we'll write you this financial plan, but the moment you walk out of here, it's not going to play out like this.
Because life just never works out exactly the way we plan.
Yep. So we stress test it in all these different directions. And so you got some variations that you likely know, but you know, especially in today where we see a real trickle down of wealth from other generations and, you know, grandmas that, you know, nobody thought had money. And then next thing you know, they had an uncle that owned a building and they got the will, and next thing you know, the grandma's got money, and that means the grandkids have money, and it's just like moving around.
I saw one story, and I don't know if it's true, but it was kind of fascinating. It was this guy who'd been a janitor at like a local junior high or something like that. Have you heard this one?
I heard this.
Yeah. And lived in a tiny little house, made himself food. I mean, just like never lived extravagantly. Nobody ever thought he had anything. And then passed away, and he had like 2 million somewhere, you know?
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say. 2 to 3 million, and he only made like 40 grand a year.
Yeah, he just
for 40 years.
I mean, I don't think he actually literally, but basically put, like you said, made 150 and only spent 40. It seems like he made 40 and only spent 3, you know, or something like that. But like you said, you never know, and comparing is always a dangerous game, I think, for sure. So what are you kind of like? Is there directions that are different recently that you're kind of guiding business owners to specifically, or are there specific questions that you're kind of fielding a lot with business owners these days?
Yeah, I would say it's not necessarily new to like right this second. It's new for the times we live in. I can usually sense when I meet somebody and they're worried about their investments or something, then you really start unpacking. I can probably tell what news they're watching.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, so it's a huge thing because it impacts decisions. And again, we're lifestyle design focused first. Yeah. And so when you look at somebody and their shoulders are hunched in and their skin's not quite looking right, and they look tired, like their aura. Like I can just feel it when I walk into a meeting. It's like, man, this person's tired. Like I just want to like give them some hydration and
a hug, maybe,
get them going here. But then when you start, unpacking it, that one has been a big one in the last, this isn't scientific, call it 3 years or call it since COVID, where, the shock of COVID and then COVID kind of dissipated, but then people had that hangover. And I even saw it last week of meeting people that, it was like, you hear the language or you see the email, hey, with everything that's going on right now.
Right.
And then you're looking at their portfolio and you're like, well, that's doing good. Your business is doing okay. Your health is reasonable. Like, help me understand, like, where where the news is feeding you that. It's like, the news is not going to tell you anything that helps you to really achieve your goals. No. A lot of our clients boat, there's a lake out in front of me. It's like, there's lots of clients that have boats or a cabin. And, we'll ask people, what's your goal for the next, couple of years, or what would be an exciting thing to talk about that happened in the next year when we meet next year? It's like, I'd like to boat more. There's nothing on the news that's going to like help you boat more. So it's, it's like literally just about you going boating more and out there in the lake, and not to be, it's not offensive to what's going on in the world. There's obviously a lot of hurt and a lot of stuff happening. But when you actually look down to like the individual, it really can be simplified a lot. And so again, people just need a warm hug to have a visit and be told, along with that, one of those meetings last week, it was like, we went through the plan and we said, okay, you've been saving for 35 years and you're not wanting to spend, I'm being careful of what I say, is like, you're not wanting to spend, but you're well over 65. And this money is definitely going to last unless we have a total financial, like the whole system falls apart. So when are you planning on spending it?
Good question.
But for so long, it's been ingrained to save, pay off your house, So it's like, you got this big portfolio, you got a $3 million house, it's paid off. Like, there's a lot of wiggle room there for the financial market to correct for a bit or crash. And then you got the house. And it's like, so it just, people get stuck in their old fiber and breaking that gristle up to kind of like, just like a massage therapist of your mind.
I like that. Sounds like you do a lot of coaching, even a lot of therapy with what you do. Listening. I like that. Yeah. A lot of listening. I can imagine that it's challenging to navigate, especially working with couples and families through different people's perception and how they handle money. Because I was going to say, one of the most tension-filled subjects is money, almost always, right? And so how do you, I mean, the listening is powerful. Is that kind of your big secret for navigating through those kind of relationships?
No, I think it's just showing up where people are. Again, some people, they just want you to listen. Some people want to plan. Some people have procrastinated everything we've told them for 15 years. And so you realize that person, it's like, if I give them 3 suggestions and we get 1, we're like winning. Other people bite into it and they're like, give me the 4th, like, what else can I do? And so it's just, that's fine. Everyone sort of rolls different. And so again, listening and technology's helped a bit, like everybody, but it really comes down to the interaction with the person.
It's a very connection intensive business, it sounds like, or at least the angle that you guys have chosen to take, which is, I think, really powerful.
Yeah. Low transaction, high net worth family.
Gotcha. Yeah, very cool. Well, as we're kind of wrapping up today, is there anything additional you'd like to share with our listeners, tips or insights into wealth management or just our world at large here?
No, the first thing that just popped in mind when you're asking me that, for lots of entrepreneurs who have excess cash, we do something called the spending accelerator exercise, and it's on a spreadsheet, but we'll just make it silos and buckets. I'll call it. So if you imagine a machine that is got a conveyor belt coming out of the back of it. So in this machine, it makes your income. And so let's use for a business owner, let's say 10,000 a month or 20,000. Let's use 20,000. So 20,000 a month is what your income is. And as that 20,000 is coming along the conveyor belt, there's little kickers, like a wood processing plant that like kicks the logs off the conveyor belt. Okay, so we're getting the visual. So that 20,000 is coming along. You want to kick a bit off for an emergency savings bucket. And then once that's built up to say whatever your number is, then that's done. But let's say we're going to kick off $2,000 for that. So that's $2,000 for that. Then you've got what we call BAM. So that's bare ass minimum. So your bare ass minimum is the expenses that exist for you to basically exist. That's not fancy travel. It's just if the shit hit the fan, you were disabled, couldn't work, you wouldn't be buying on Amazon all the time. You'd be like mortgage, car payment, groceries. It's like, that's it. You know, all the fancy in this region, it's like parents send their kids to $40,000 a year hockey academies. Yeah. So that stuff would stop. So we got 20,000 coming along the conveyor belt. Some money to the emergency bucket, your BAM. So say you spend 10,000 a month, it's like 10,000 comes off. We got 8 left. Then you've got, maybe a core investment bucket. So call it the S&P 500, call it the NASDAQ, whatever sort of like, call it a balanced portfolio. Some money goes into that. Then you've got real estate. Maybe you want to own property, and maybe it's a property that is going to require, the best piece of real estate is the rent covers any sort of payments. That would be ideal. But in some cases, you're sitting on maybe a building or a house and you're going to subdivide it, and you need to negative cash flow, float it for a while. A couple grand goes to that. And then you've got a high risk bucket. So again, this isn't a buy or sell recommendation, but call it crypto or, I had a client call me the other day and they're going to do a speculative mushroom psilocybin company, so some small amount into that. Okay. So you get the point as the money's coming down. Well, at the end of the conveyor belt, if that's done properly, money falls off the end of the conveyor belt, which you purposely spend in real time. And so often when we do this in a spreadsheet for people, they've never actually lined up all their assets in a line, like our house, my savings at work, my value of my company, real estate, and looked at, okay, well, if I did those numbers that I gave you for the next 10 years, what does that bottom number actually equate to? And so when we go through this with people and you take them on this journey and say, okay, well, you're 38 now, at 61, you're going to have 9 million dollars. It's like, well, whoa, like that's a lot. Or some people say it's not enough, but often we'll say, how much do you spend right now versus how much 9 million could allow you to spend at that point? And then you can start tweaking the actual inputs that are being kicked off the conveyor belt to lesser numbers so that more falls off the end to spend in real time, but you're still being responsible with every bucket that you've topped up along the way.
That's really cool.
So I'd leave you guys with that. And make sure you don't forget insurance and risk management, because for a lot of people, that is laying out a plan. And we have a pyramid for this of like a stacking bricks, but like you have a plan or a goal. Hey, we want to do this, or I want to retire, or, again, I want to be flexible at whatever age. To do that, if you got hurt or if you died, that would impact your family getting there. So make sure you got life insurance. Make sure you address critical illness insurance, disability, and group benefits. So in there, and mental health.
So important. Yeah.
Because if not addressed early enough, you could have all the money in the world at like 60 and have shitty mental health and bad relationships. And that's a big cavity in sort of that big wealth building block plan that I talked about.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's some really valuable information. And for any of our listeners who want to dig in deeper to that with Dustin, we will make sure we include the link to Serviss Wealth in the comments on this, and also to his book, The And Paradigm, and to your podcast as well, so people can connect with you and follow you and keep building on a lot of this great advice that you've shared with us today. Thank you so much, Dustin.
Thank you. And your questions were great. And this is really a gift to be able to engage. And I appreciate what you talked about.
Well, thank you so much, Dustin. And thank you to all of our listeners. And we look forward to having you join us next time as well.
You have been listening to the Beacon Way podcast. Make sure to join us for new episodes every week. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Beacon Way on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.